This is Willpower.
Hello. Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. Dr. Daniel Cohen from Soltec and so many other places. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to get a chance to meet visionaries like yourself and have these conversations to be able to share with the audience. Today, we're going to lean in a lot to sleep and understanding the body when it comes to recovery, brainwave state, and this amazing innovation that you've crafted and the team that you're working with. So I wanna introduce you formally and warmly to the audience and want to hear a little bit about the dirty details of your scientific background and just leaning into that a bit. So can you share a bit of your journey and the things that you've worked on already?
Sure. You know, my journey actually began when I was a teenager, and I read about this yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda. And when I read that book, you know, I was just so fascinated with the mind. And that's what drove me actually into neurology. I decided I wanted to be either a neurologist or a psychiatrist. But, after medical school, it was like, I don't think psychiatry is right for me.
Yeah.
So I became a neurologist, I became board certified. And then I actually moved right into business. And the reason was that, I became a neurologist in the very early 80s. And it was an interesting field to make diagnoses. But at that point, there wasn't a lot you could do to help people. And so I figured I would take that knowledge and move into business and develop products. So the first product we made the first automated brainwave monitor to be used during high-risk surgeries to help prevent strokes.
Wow.
And then we took that same technology and wrote new software, and we pioneered the field of automated sleep diagnostics. So, when we got into that sleep field, there were only 300 sleep labs globally. And when we left that field 10 years later, there were 3,000, most of which were using our technology. Because
so cool.
one of the problems that sleep labs were having was it took a technician 4 to 6 hours to basically score a record. And we ultimately got it down to 1 minute.
Wow. So the thing about sleep diagnostics too, and for people who are listening, just kind of breaking down that I think back in the day when you would go to a sleep lab, it was like this, you're working on monitoring and checking the diagnostics of people's sleep. And I think especially in the area of people with sleep apnea or other challenges in sleeping well, and you're in this lab and the lights are different and the bed is different and the leads are all over your body and all the things. So it doesn't really give you an accurate reflection of what's happening at home in bed. Would you say that that's sort of true? And has that evolved?
Well, unfortunately, it has not evolved in the sleep lab. And is it a problem? Yes, definitely. I mean, especially all those wires. And you're hooked up and you feel constrained and you've got a video camera on you. So you feel like somebody's watching you. So it is, in that sense, it's not painful, but it is uncomfortable from that standpoint. And you're right, you do not sleep as well. But these days, most people that visit sleep labs are being checked out for the possibility of sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And those people are so sleep deprived that have it that they do fall asleep. And then you can see the apneic events. So even though it's a semi-intrusive environment, it certainly is okay from a diagnostic standpoint.
Great. And that sort of leads us, I want to lean a bit into the tech right away, because I think that this is such an interesting conversation, this Soltec innovation. Was there something what was the inspiration to get to this Soltec device, to this specific innovation? Was there something that was like a beta tested first and it evolved into this, or was this just the thing that you've been working on for a number of years and said, this is how it's going to work best for people to be comfortable and to help regain or, recover themselves well?
Well, actually, the real driver for the technology was something that I had learned in medical school in my first year. I mean, I was sort of shocked when they told us that 75 to 90% of all medical problems are either caused by or made worse by stress. And so it was really chronic stress. And so I would ask my professors, well, if this is the primary pathology in healthcare, why aren't we treating that directly?
Hmm.
And they had good answers. I mean, their answer was, well, stress originates from a neurologic standpoint in the brainstem. And this is at the base of the skull in the middle. And you can't really get at it, with any kind of mechanical fixture. So you couldn't put a needle electrode there. There's a good chance you could kill the patient, and furthermore, there's nothing you could do to access it that way. And we're talking about a very, very old structure. And this structure started to evolve 500 million years ago when fish started to develop organs. Because, think about it right now, Kristen, you don't say, oh, my liver is not functioning right. I have to send this a signal. And you're not consciously aware of how your organs are working. All right. And so as the nervous system evolved, right, it says, hey, we have to automatically control these things. And that's all controlled in a small area at the base of the brain, in this primitive brainstem, which is sort of at the front end of the spinal cord. All right. That's how primitive it is. Mm. And so they said, look, we can't reach it that way. And because it evolved so many years ago, as the rest of the brain evolved, it adopted some of those same neuroreceptors and transmitters. And therefore they said, we can't use pharmacology very well to treat this particular area of the brainstem because there'd be too many side effects because you'd affect too many parts of the brain. So they basically said, we're left with behavioral techniques like breathing exercises, relaxation of one form or another, or, the most effective, if people can get good at it, is meditation. Mm-hmm. And so that became the de facto sort of go-tos for, dealing with chronic stress. And I got to tell you that most people can't get good enough at those things to make a meaningful impact. And so I had done very well in my prior business, particularly related to Breathe Right nasal strips, that I said, you know what, we've got some money to invest. Let's see if we can solve this chronic stress issue. And so, it turns out that the same area that we had the impact in the brain, the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, known as rest and digest, mm-hmm. Versus sympathetic fight or flight, that you needed to stimulate that area to solve chronic stress, but that's the same area that controls sleep. Mm-hmm. And that's good and bad for us because, people look at our technology and they say, oh, that's for sleep. And I go, no, as a doctor, the most important thing we do is for chronic stress.
Yeah, because it's affecting sleep so deeply.
And the rest of your health.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. And aging and everything, right? Mindset. And when you speak about meditation, I have a relatively robust meditation practice that I really keeps me balanced day to day, and I really value it. And various different styles of meditation techniques. I like to kind of play around with it because I've been meditating for quite some time. But I think many people are like, oh, I'm not a good meditator, or it's hard to figure out, or it's really not hard to figure out. But it's like dedicating yourself to it is definitely something you have to schedule in and work in. And we all have big, full, rich lives that are full plates and jobs and everything. So you and I were just speaking before we started recording about the difference about looking at what meditation is and then looking at relaxation as just sort of semantically and physically a different thing. And so can you speak a little bit about the difference, or maybe the ease of focusing more on relaxation than focusing on meditation?
I think for relaxation, I think most people think about it as, I want to move into sort of a drowsy state, mm-hmm. And that will relax my body because my body gets relaxed when I go to sleep. All of that is completely true. And the problem, however, is that our society, most people are sleep deprived. Mm. And so if you try to relax, most people will just fall asleep. Okay.
Like short, you mean like short sleep latency, like they're falling asleep, they're relaxing and then they're passing out.
Right.
The other thing I want to say is like, I really want to make a distinguish between the two things, which is there's a lot of, even my mind thinks, well, what can I do to relax? Right. Well, it's 9:00. I'm going to put on like a movie or a show or like, or God forbid, doom scrolling or like on the phone. It's not really relaxing us. And I just want you to maybe highlight that from a neurological standpoint, that we're like, not just looking at light, but we have to be processing, right? Relaxation in front of a television or a screen is probably not full relaxation.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea, whether it be relaxation or meditation, is essentially to not think.
Mm.
Okay. And you want to turn off the cortex of the brain, the thinking brain. That's what you want to do, because only in that state can you essentially stop processing, and especially stop processing about things you're worried about,
Mm-hmm.
or thinking hard about.
Yeah.
And, one of the distinctions, that I try to teach people is thinking versus feeling.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay. And, most people, you sort of get a little lost there, and they go, well, okay, I know what thinking is, but what do you mean by feeling when it comes to relaxation and meditation? And what should I be feeling? And is it emotional or is it physical? And I do this exercise with people, where I say, look, most people are kind of feeling deficient. All right. Now, and men are worse than women. Okay. Because your feeling nature goes across both physical and emotional.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And in our society, men still hold this stereotype as, hey, look, I don't want to cry when I'm watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that kind of thing. And so I try to teach people, look, on a physical standpoint, just sitting there, what happens when you turn your attention to your body? What do you feel? And, most guys will say, I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything unless I'm in pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
or unless I'm hungry. And that's a problem. That means their feeling nature is really deficient. Okay. I mean, I used to be like that.
Sort of, elaborate for the listeners. It could be that it's like right now I'm sitting and I'm feeling, my feet against the rail of the stool that I'm sitting at and my sits bones, but also maybe I'm feeling my heart rate, or maybe I'm having an emotion of elation or excitement because I just heard you say something. And in my mind, it was like, oh, this is like a little bit of a somatic conversation. And I love that. And so it's tapping into all those aspects. It's not just emotions. It is also physical sensations as well.
Right. But now let's take it to the next level, because what you just described, and you did it beautifully, was what happens during relaxation.
Mm.
You're feeling at that level. Now in meditation, let's take it to the next level. And what the next level is, how do I feel all of me? And all of me is more than the physical.
Mm.
So let's go through this exercise right now. I'll do it with you.
Great. Let's do it.
Okay. Take your hands and hold them up like this.
Okay. Listeners, you're doing this too with us as long as you're not driving.
Okay. Right. So your palms are facing forward. All right. Now, what I want you to focus on is, what do you feel when you focus just on your palms and the palmar aspect of your fingers? I just want you to take your time and just focus on those areas and just feel the subtleties there.
Mm. Yeah. Temperature change and little
Okay.
tingles.
Well,
Yeah.
the little tingle. All right. Now try to intensify that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can do that.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So you've been a meditator. Now I want you to see if you can extend that throughout your body.
Yeah. I can feel in like shoulders. Like it's very prominent in my fingertips and my fingers, but it's like you can sort of feel the wave of a bit of energetics. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. Now, in a deep meditative state, now with practice, you can feel that throughout your entire body.
Mm.
And it can get very, very intense. And the more intense that gets, equates to a deeper level of meditation.
Mm.
Right. Now, you did that very well. And especially in this setting. But while we were doing that, I could feel it throughout my entire body. Even as I'm talking to you now, I feel it everywhere throughout my body, and it's really a result of using our technology.
Wow.
Okay. Now, let's get further into this thinking versus feeling aspect.
Yeah.
All right. Because when you can feel, that tingling throughout all of you, or that presence throughout all of you, your entire feeling nature is enhanced. All right. Now, what is feeling nature? Okay. It's physical. We just demonstrated that. You felt this tingling and you extended that tingling beyond just your hands. Right. At the same time, you can end up feeling deeper into your body if you choose to go that way. But what does it mean for thinking? Okay. When you are feeling like that, you're not thinking because you're focusing on your feeling. Okay. That's a big, big step forward, because when you can do that and you can reliably, put yourself into that state, instantly.
Yeah.
You're turning off your brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're turning off your thinking brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you do that, you're not having stress. Okay. That is the best way to counteract chronic stress. All right. It's key. But then there's some other really
as simple as starting with that technique. If someone feels like getting into a deep meditative state is not something they can get to easily, to just do that little exercise with the hands and feeling and taking a pause, which maybe would take someone 1 or 2 minutes. And I always think about that's so applicable, of course, at home to get into relaxation. But if they have a moment where they're really feeling a lot of stress somewhere, to kind of close their eyes and create that proprioceptive understanding, what am I feeling, can maybe shift their state a little bit in just a short period of time.
Right. It'll shift it a little, but the idea is to shift it even more and more. Now, here's something else that's really interesting about that. See, and you're already a meditator. So, if you did this exercise with a lot of people, they may not feel anything, and they certainly would not be able to extend it. Okay. So it takes more effort to get there if you're just meditating. The nice thing is with our technology, we get there a lot faster.
Yeah.
Because it increases your presence.
Yeah.
But here's another key benefit. When you can move into that state, your mindfulness, your awareness of your egoic self, goes up. So you can see that, I've just been triggered and now I'm angry about something. Why? Why do I have that emotion? What belief is in me, or what happened to me in my past that somehow traumatized me and caused me to develop a coping strategy? What's there that I need to resolve so those things don't bother me in the future? All right. So you can start, and that's what mindfulness is really about. It's like understanding what kind of programming you've already done to yourself in terms of your brain and unwinding those processes. Because that's a great freedom technique in terms of not being triggered and having all those negative emotions. It's another way to diminish chronic stress.
Amazing. Yeah, then that's so true. And I think this is something that the planet I continue to talk about this even in the work I'm doing with Sherpa Breath and Cold, and getting people to really understand that this is sort of the biggest pandemic we've ever faced when it comes to levels of stress, levels of environmental challenges, and things coming back at us.
Right.
And you so eloquently put it on the beginning of the show, that really affects our daily life, our health, and our sleep in such a big way. And then when all of that cascade is going the wrong direction, then we don't feel so great. So yeah, beautiful.
Well,
to like that.
But let me take you one more level down.
Okay.
This is kind of interesting,
Okay.
and that is, thinking versus knowing. Okay. People don't think about this because they don't experience it. We all think we got a problem. Okay. I got to think about the solution. Okay. Let me give you a whole nother way to think about it. Instead of thinking about a solution, think about the question that you want answered. And then do this kind of exercise where you move into that state. And what's amazing is when you do that, oftentimes you'll end that session and you'll know the answer, but you won't have thought about it.
But you will have thought about the question. You're not trying
You will have thought about, right.
The answer or the solution the one thing you're thinking is the solution.
Right. But then, actually don't even think about the solution. Think about the question that you want answered, and then let it go. Don't think about it anymore.
Okay.
All right. And then let the answer come to you.
Nice.
It's like sometimes, think about this. This happens all the time to most people. They go, I can't remember the name of that actor.
Right. Then you stop thinking and it pops in your head later.
Exactly. That's the difference between thinking and knowing. Your question to yourself was, what is the name of that actor? And then the knowing kicks in when you stop thinking about it.
Now, can you just speak to that? Like, so this feels like a very force versus allow thing. This also feels like just like people who have challenges with rumination. I know when they read my EEG, they were like, hey, you have a lot of rumination going on in the way that your brainwave states work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something also in the mix of this, which is, understanding from an energetic standpoint that the body and let's say, not even just energetic, but neurological standpoint, that the body and the brain can feed you that. Like, is there a chemical cascade that is like, do we know enough about the brain to really understand that there's like, I can think the question and put it I'm putting it actually into my physical body or into my thoughts or into my energetics. And then the brain can respond in kind by some sort of potential synapse firing where your memory is made, or, is there any kind of deeper thing there to chat about?
Yeah, there is, but then,
on it.
yeah, I mean, this is the thing that interested me so much when I was a teenager. I wanted to understand the mind, because in Western, culture, life is chemistry. And so the mind comes from the brain. And that's what I was taught as a neurologist, that no, all mind is derived from brain. But then, you would think about these feats that these yogis could do in India. And you go, wait a minute. Yeah, there's something else happening.
Yeah.
And as a neurologist, I also had to take care of people that had a sleep disorder called narcolepsy.
Mm.
Okay. And one of the things that doctors don't like to talk about is, when you sit there with the patient and you ask them, no, does anything else happen to you that's a little different? And a lot of doctors don't want to go here because it contradicts what they're taught in medical school, that, all mind comes from brain. These people will kind of look at you and say, well, there is something strange that happens to me is, every once in a while I have these experiences where I find myself up at the ceiling looking down at my body. Mm. And the funny thing is, in one of the hospitals that I was trained at, one of the professors ran a support group for narcoleptics. And what he would do was,
clarify for the listenership, narcolepsy is when you can fall asleep in any given moment in interesting spaces and in the middle of what seems like you're sympathetically awake in a focused state.
Right. The narcoleptics have what's called sleep attacks. It's not just excessive daytime sleepiness. You're right. They all of a sudden, boom, they've just got to fall asleep.
Yeah.
They also have something that's called cataplexy, where with strong emotion, they lose muscle tone. It could be complete and they can collapse, or it can just literally be an arm.
Wow.
And these patients also have what's called sleep onset REM, so that when they fall asleep, they immediately move into a dream, which is atypical.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one of the other things is this out of body experience. And medicine doesn't like to talk about this. So they renamed it in 2008. And they said, no, these patients just have hallucinations and delusions. Well, that's like a schizophrenic. No,
anybody feel too good who's talking about that, just trying to get an answer.
Right. And so my favorite professor, he ran a narcolepsy support group. And before, while everybody was in there, he would hang outside the room where they couldn't see him. And all these people would be talking about their out-of-body experiences. And then as soon as he walked in, they would shut up because the patients don't want to be thought of as crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you think about that for a second and you say, wait a minute, if there's part of me that can move outside my body. And again, this goes back to these profound meditators that were very experienced, primarily located in India and Nepal, and what they could do. And you said, is that part of the mind? So is there a dual aspect of mind? Part of it is organic. I mean, obviously the circuitry of your brain stores memories, beliefs, you develop attitudes, you have defense mechanisms. All of that is organically based. But then we just talked about this thinking versus knowing. And there's other aspects related to that. For instance, when you move into a meditative state and you're awake and you're fully functioning, everything just flows and you're not using your brain anymore. So your brain, when you look at brain waves, your brain waves can be in theta, not even alpha, which is relaxed, or beta, which is processing, literally in theta. So these people are like in a drowsy state. So the cortex of the brain is shut down. So really, really good meditators can live in that state, and they live in a state of knowing versus thinking.
And you would say that's the state of theta.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a theta brainwave state, like 4 to 7 hertz.
Yep.
And that's what you see in light sleep. And that's what you see in drowsiness. All right. And so even though they're not drowsy, they've put their brain into shutdown mode so they could operate from this other aspect of mind. So somebody who's a very, very advanced meditator can move into this state at will. And in that state, guess what? No stress. Okay. Right. Absolutely no stress.
And you said alpha, relaxed, beta.
Yeah. Beta is processing. Beta is thinking.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Those are the highest frequencies. There's another level, gamma, but that's irrelevant, at this point. And then theta is the light sleep or profound meditation.
Meditation. Yeah.
And people that are unbelievably good at meditation can actually move into delta, which is 1 to 3 hertz, which is the equivalent of deep sleep, but they're actually awake and can be functional. Wow. But that's very, very rare.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of this is good. So like unpacking this is so important. And let's talk a little bit about just like pushing our focus towards Soltec and the actual technology and what it's doing, how it's helping manage stress and sleep in this way, just from a real tactical standpoint. I mean, I can explain and describe to the audience. It's great to check out Soltec online, SOLTEC. But the device that I have looks like almost like an infinity. It's sort of like a small shoebox size thing that reminds me of an infinity symbol. I don't know if anyone said that to you before. Yep. Black goes under the bed, and then it has like a wristwatch is the wrong word, but it has like an arm watch type.
Yeah, a wearable
device, a wearable. Thank you.
Yeah, what's happening there, we realized that what we needed to do is entrain different parts of the brain to get people into these states or to support these states. All right. And if you think about the different parts of the brain, people look at brain waves. So there's different frequencies. Well, even the primitive parts of the brain operate at different frequencies too. And because they're more primitive, they operate at lower frequencies. And so there was this theoretical mechanism called entrainment. Think of having 2 tuning forks that operate at the same frequency. If you start one vibrating and you move it closer to the other without touching the other starts to vibrate. So there's this resonance that develops due to the vibration of the air molecules. Because the other one,
same frequency of the tuning fork.
Right. But if the other one was a different frequency, it wouldn't start when you moved one closer to the other. All right. So entrainment is how do I provide a stimulus at the same frequency of that part of the brain that I want to stimulate? And, normally I'd be embarrassed to tell you this. It took us 15 years to figure out how to do this, but nobody had ever figured out how to do it. So we ended up having to do it with magnetic frequency, not electromagnetic, because we had to work at very, very low frequencies. So when you look at that box that goes under the bed, there's 2 aluminum tubes, and inside of it are strong magnets, and there's a motor attached to each of them separately. So the different motor to run each of them, and it rotates the magnet in the tube at a very low frequency to produce an entrainment effect on the primitive parts of the brain that we want to.
And also you use that style or that delivery vehicle, let's say, because you wanted it to be subtle and safe and all of those things.
Yes.
Right. That's why you're distinguishing between, hey, it's not electromagnetic, it's magnetic.
Right. Exactly. Precisely. And so it's safe, it's non-invasive. And it operates at very low frequencies that electromagnetism really can't operate at anyway, in a pure form.
Yeah.
And so, because we have to go really low, typically we have to go at around what's called 0.25 hertz. So a whole cycle of the magnet would take 4 seconds. That's really slow. This is way below brainwave frequencies.
Yeah.
All right. So that's to enhance the function of the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. In other words, we help you do it. So it's like a supplement, because let's face it, most people don't have the time commitment or the will to spend hours and hours, collectively years meditating, to get to the point where it's going to do you any good. So we wanted to accelerate the process. That was our goal.
Yeah.
How can we provide something so that you don't have to do any work? I mean, let me give you this oxymoronic phrase. All right. We wanted to develop something that it essentially was a form of meditation where you could do something else at the same time. All right. So you could literally turn this on, have it by your feet, and you could be doing emails, and it would induce a state of meditation. And so the oxymoron is multitasking meditation. Okay.
Which is like not what we talk about in the world of meditation. It's like,
right.
Might be that, but that's what you're trying to do is light the brain up in the specific areas or the specific brainwave state, that those things can be done at the same time. And the decent amount of usage, I'm assuming, is consumers using this while they're sleeping, so that they are in a relaxed or rested sleep state while this is happening, so that there's like a cascade of even more healing and staying settled in, which for me is the big thing about this. And I just, from a Soltec standpoint, when someone gets in an elevator with you and they're like, what is this? Like, what do you say in like the encapsulation of that, like 30 seconds to really describe to the audience what Soltec is at its core, like kind of from the mission or the function?
Sure. This is a technology that can enhance the activity of certain areas of the brain to produce, profound levels of relaxation and meditation, as well as assist in producing better sleep, particularly deep sleep.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I'm going to replay that to myself so I can tell people, because I'm like telling them a 5-minute story around what my Soltec is doing. So yeah, super beautiful to understand that at sort of a core level in that way. And then, so people are utilizing this device while they are working in some cases, as well as sleeping and having it in their home.
Yeah. I mean, some people do both. Okay. Some people have developed an interesting technique where they want to do meditation, but they can't find time during the day to do it. So what they will do is they'll go to sleep. They might go to sleep a little earlier, okay, to make time. So they get their normal sleep in, but when they wake up, they don't end the session. Okay. What they do is they get up, they typically go to the bathroom, and they've already had enough sleep. Okay. So they can be awake, and then they climb back into bed and they move, lying down. They start doing a meditation session. Again, they don't have to change the settings of the technology, because the technology, as you know, has different settings for meditation and relaxation and sleep. Okay. But they don't have to do that, because the core frequencies that are played end up being the same for, meditation, relaxation, and sleep. It's other frequencies get added. Okay. Yeah. And so they get in bed, these frequencies are active. They already are awake, so they're not likely to fall back to sleep unless they're really sleep deprived. And what happens is it will move them into a state of deeper meditation.
So they're kind of feeling that upon waking, starting their day that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And always with the wearable, right? The wearable is an important component of this, because that's the biofeedback mechanism. Yeah.
It's a closed loop feedback system. And it's really used mainly in the sleep part, because what it does is it analyzes your sleep in real time to know when you start moving into deep sleep. It sends a quick signal, like a tenth of a second. It transmits a Bluetooth signal to the generator under the bed saying, hey, he or she is moving into deep sleep. So run these frequencies, because those frequencies are different than other stages of sleep. So it starts to run those. And then once you get into deep sleep, into delta sleep, then it says, okay, now we want to add these other frequencies, which will further deepen that deep sleep.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's basically operating based on your particular needs at that given time based upon your sleep stage. But in addition, it goes through a 5-night calibration process in the beginning because, remember I talked about the autonomic nervous system and parasympathetic and sympathetic. And it's a bandwidth of frequencies that you operate. Your sleep may not be exactly like mine in terms of frequency. All right. I might be at 0.24, and I am. That's my frequency is 0.24. You might be at 0.22. All right.
So and the important piece of having this 5-night test is like,
yes.
And why when I saw that that's the case, I was like, oh, this is good because it's got to learn you. It has to learn the bio-individual, the person who's using it and all that so that it can understand, I think, and make the adjustments necessary.
Exactly. So it gets personalized to where you operate in your parasympathetic division to give you the best dose of stimulus to get your sleep the deepest. And then even after the 5 nights, it's still monitoring all of that, and it may make a little change every 12 nights. You know?
When we talk about this wearable device too, it's not that it's sending a signal back at you through the wearable device. The wearable device is the biofeedback tracker that sends the signal through Bluetooth to the Soltec machine, and that is giving you the frequencies back. Now, I just want you to explain or just to say that it's my understanding that the frequencies that are coming out of the machine, because it's under you, are going to be able to connect with the body at a frequency level, because we all know there's energetics within 4 feet of us and things like that. And
Exactly.
That's how you're shifting the brainwave state. So I just think that's important to be said, that there's no like buzzing or feeling or sensation coming through the device that might wake you. It is actually just monitoring you. And then it's from a frequency standpoint within the space of your bed. That's why you can't, I'm assuming, have the Soltec in one room and then 2 rooms over have your biofeedback device.
No, because the magnetic field, the frequencies won't carry that far. They only carry about 4 feet.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It affects, it can, you want to place it as close to your feet as you can reasonably. So if it can't fit under the bed, and, I place mine sort of, under their calves, calves, ankles, right around there. All right. But if it couldn't fit under the bed, put it on the floor by the footboard, and that'll be close enough.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. The frequencies will get to where they need to go. The other thing that, some users, worried about was, boy, am I getting radiation, any kind of radiation from the wearable when it tells the generator what frequencies to put out. And over the entire night, the amount of time that's active, is about 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there's not really any exposure there that's of any significance.
It's not like on, and it's not a big like EMF radiation, just like back and forth, right? It's just like tapping in, checking in, checking in, checking in. Yeah.
Right. It'll make about 40 adjustments during the entire night, but each of those adjustments is just a fraction of a second.
Yeah. Beautiful. That's great to know, especially for the biohackers out there who are worried about all those things, and anyone else who just wants to make sure that nothing's going to disrupt them or that there's no other side effects.
Right. Yeah. We have biohackers that use it that sleep within a copper cage and all of that stuff to prevent all that stuff. And they use it because they realized, oh, this isn't giving me any problem.
Beautiful. And what sort of results have you been seeing for some people, right? Like, it's like, who's the ideal user for this? Besides, I am for sure, because I'm having wake-ups wake-ups come to me at like 3-4 in the morning sometimes. And my stress load from, varies, of course, but I felt like it was a very good application for me to be able to improve my sleep. And just what would you say are like your 2 or 3 avatars of people who are like, oh, this is the device for me, where they're really getting and gaining help? Like if someone, and I'd love to address sort of like the sleep apneic person and just if that's something that makes sense for them to add into their regimen or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let me address that first. Bless you. First of all, for people with obstructive sleep apnea, this is not a solution for that. Okay, that's a mechanical issue in the throat. There's an obstruction that develops based on their anatomy and physiology, And, so that's not something this can fix. However, there's a core problem that everybody suffers from that this can fix, including those people. All right. So this can still be a useful adjunct to their treatment. And that is, let's talk about delta sleep, deep sleep. All right. And this is kind of a sad story here because, when you're an infant, you have a tremendous amount of deep sleep because you're growing, and growth hormone is secreted during deep sleep. 70 to 80% of your growth hormone secretion happens during deep sleep, right? So then you get to be in your late teens, or let's say 20, and you don't really need growth hormone, but deep sleep provides so many other benefits. Okay, it regulates your many of your hormones. It essentially regulates your immune system, and it helps to clear out bad proteins in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It even affects your gut hormones, leptin and ghrelin, in terms of am I eating too much? So it has an effect on weight, and therefore obesity, diabetes, heart disease, all of those things. So deep sleep is vital to one's health. However, beginning in your mid-20s, you start to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get to 75, 80, you've pretty much lost it all. And so you lose it constantly as you're aging,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a problem. When you look at a chart of, age and loss of deep sleep and increase in illness, you see a perfect correlation. As you lose deep sleep, you develop more and more illnesses. So obviously you want to hold on to your deep sleep. And so what we see, that's principally why people use our system,
Mm-hmm.
because so many good things happen with deep sleep. All right. Number one, if you have deep sleep, chances are you're going to have less awakenings during the night.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's a big deal. So sleep maintenance is improved, right? Our technology helps you fall asleep as well, because we're stimulating, again, we're working to turn off your brain by essentially activating the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. Again, stopping the thinking.
Right.
Okay. And then we also...
Did you say slowing the brainwave state?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So we do that not only by parasympathetics, but also because we have low brainwave frequency stimulation in there as well. So we can produce 4 different frequencies simultaneously. All right. So we add them when it's needed, depending on your stage of sleep and when, the time of night it is in terms of, or how long you've been asleep, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. So deep sleep is key. So we have some athletes that use it just because they have normal levels of deep sleep, but they want to prevent the loss of it. They don't want to go through that dip.
Well, it's so important. I just want to interject and say also how important it is for people who are doing athletics, sports, even if whether it's your personal or professional. I was reading a sleep study about, university level basketball players, and they've done this with professional teams as well, just giving them all an extra hour of sleep to see how they recover and perform. And it's just the difference it makes is massive with I think they did 3-point throws, or I can't remember what the specific test was, but the difference was quite substantial, right? And so it's even if you're not getting extra time in bed with something like this, you're getting better recovery. And it also sounds like better hormonal cascade, metabolism, longevity. There's so many things coming with this. So I appreciate bringing up athletics as well, because sometimes I think we think about, well, I'm aging, so if I'm just turning 40, I probably have a little time before I need something like this. And it's it's the small changes that we make throughout our life that actually give us the better results. And anyone who's performing at a high level, whether that's, I guess, an executive, even at the office, is an athlete of corporate world, or if it's someone who's performing in sport, this is a really beautiful way. That's passive, which is what I love. You put on the wearable, and then it's passive, and that's a nice biohack.
Yeah. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But getting back to the 40-year-old, the interesting thing is, even by your mid to late 40s, you've lost 60 to 70% of your delta sleep.
Yeah.
And most people don't realize, wait a minute, I'm already down to that level. And that's a problem. And so what we've been fascinated with is the fact that, we can take an older person and they can start using the technology and we can restore a lot of their deep sleep. Now, having said that, okay, so you got to ask, okay, well, how does that happen? All right. Because these people, the reason they've lost their deep sleep is they've lost these brain cells that produce the deep sleep. Because there's a lot of circuitry that is involved in causing deep sleep to occur. All right. Everybody thinks it's a passive, process, and it's because your brain turns off. But deep sleep is an active process to produce delta waves. All right. You've got to go from the reticular activating system that houses the autonomic nervous system. Fibers go up to the thalamus, which is that control center. Fibers go from the reticular nucleus of the thalamus to the other intrathalamic nuclei, and they coordinate this whole slow brainwave state throughout the brain. This is a very, very active process, but what it does is it puts the cortex in a state where it's not thinking, okay? Nice. And it's cleaning itself out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, wow.
All of that is really, really key. And so when you think about all that circuitry, it's like, well, wait a minute, what's happening? And you probably have heard of the term neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. When you learn something new, your brain actually changes and you grow new circuits. Well, that's what we're doing here. The circuitry related to delta sleep is regrown because we're stimulating that part of the reticular activating system that is the beginning stage that causes this circuitry to be put into use. So when that gets stimulated, it's telling the rest of the neurons, hey, you need to fire. Well, if they're not there, they redevelop.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah.
Okay. So we call this neurogenesis. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that doesn't happen overnight. No. I mean, think about all these circuits growing. And so the older you are, the longer it takes for the reestablishment of delta sleep. So it can take 6 months for somebody who's in their 70s. Mm-hmm. When I started using this, I had lost most of my delta sleep. And it took me a while to regrow it. But now I've got the delta sleep of a 30-year-old.
And you can test that, right? You're testing that on yourself, brainwave state. Yeah.
Yeah, because we give you a full report and we have trending on the report. So you can see what's happened over the past couple of years and how these metrics have changed.
Yeah, so beautiful. Yeah, and because there's a handy dandy app that goes along with it.
Right. And all that information is there. And so we've also seen this whole neurogenesis peripherally too, which is interesting. And so, we're in discussions with the FDA about getting FDA approval for this for peripheral neuropathy.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And so again, the applications,
right, into like people who are having to go through chemo, people who are having memory loss, like there's a lot of applications there that it potentially could be supporting. And this is, what's so interesting about Soltec and devices like this and the FDA and all of that. It's like, a lot of times it's like, I'm like, hey, a device is working to a certain extent and there could be additional benefits and we don't always get to talk about them or we may not fully know, but the research and the science is always catching up to the actualization of the things that we're using. And this is, I think, why the biohacking category sort of evolved and how health optimization has grown. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, that's risky, or how do we know that's really working? And it's like, well, make sure that it's working to a certain level of like efficiency and efficacy for you to at a certain place, and know that the breadth of that and many of these technologies that we use, including Soltec, is like there's an expanded area that because we are shifting the brainwave state is actually there's so much more potential there, right? And that's all I need to say about that. But it's just an exciting. This is such an exciting, cutting edge technology in a way that's like, we've been fighting this sleep thing. And I know that we were talking off camera earlier about Molly Eastman from Sleep is a Skill, who's an amazing sleep coach. And there's so many people that are challenged with sleep and stress issues at a heightened level, or stress issues that are then causing bigger sleep issues, or sleep issues that are causing stress issues.
Like both ways.
Really beautiful opportunity to say, okay, there's something else that isn't just sleep lab, or that just isn't, meditation beautiful and breathwork beautiful and all these things, but something that's a bit more of a support mechanism all the time for every hour that you're sleeping, with it being on. And as you mentioned, sometimes when people are awake.
Right. And what's so nice about it is you just started. You don't have to do anything.
I know.
And you can do other things while you're doing it.
Just doing something. Is it working? It's like, look, open your app and just go to sleep, and the magic will ensue. So you've seen your brain go from 70-year-old brain. Is that what you said?
Yeah, to 30.
To a 30-year-old brain. That's amazing. And have you noticed changes in your body and the way that you're thinking, relating to the world?
Oh my God. I mean, back when I started, I was only sleeping 3 hours a night.
Wow.
I had 4 cups of coffee a day and took naps.
Yeah.
Now I don't drink coffee, and I have some decaf.
Me too. I like a little ritual in the morning.
Right. Yeah. And no naps, and I'm fully alert. And and it allowed me to do other things, because I was so tired that I had dropped off my exercise regimen. Mm-hmm. So now I can pick up my exercise regimen again. And because I'm getting growth hormone, I could actually build muscle naturally.
Yeah. So great.
Well, and another thing that happened, which was really kind of bizarre, I didn't realize it at first when it was happening. I had to go back to the textbooks to figure it out. But after about, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 years, when my delta was really well restored, all of a sudden, I would put the same amount of food on my plate. And then I found that I was only eating half of it. And after a while, after a few days, it's like, what's happening? What's happened to my appetite? Mm-hmm. And then over the course of that month, I had developed a bit of a pot belly, and I lost 25 pounds.
Wow.
Over about 4 to 6 weeks, and my pot belly disappeared because, and then I realized, the parasympathetic division affects what's called the enteric division in the gut, that part of the autonomic nervous system, and it decreases ghrelin and it increases leptin. So it basically, you'll still get the trigger when to eat, but because leptin is increased, that's the hormone that says stop eating. That comes from the fat cells that take the glucose and turn it into fat, and they say, got enough, no more. And that's what I was finding during my meal. It was like, I'm
satiated.
Yeah, exactly. I'm satiated. Stop eating.
Beautiful about, because we want it's modulated levels, of course. We want good levels of leptin, but so many of us are low in that. And it's like, from the stress, from everything else going on. So to have, there's a lot of conversation in the world of quantum biology about getting more light and all these things that are absolutely very true. And leptin is a thing that we could kind of be like the sneaky last thing we look at when these things are happening. So it's really beautiful and interesting to hear that you're like, all of a sudden that all kicks in, it recovers, it modulates your leptin levels to where they need to be. And you're like, oh, I'm not eating so much, which, we need to be eating food and nourishing ourselves. But like lots of us are overeating, know?
Right. Well, and being able to exercise and rebuild that muscle, without any other supplements.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on a Zoom call yesterday in a meeting, and it was a long meeting. It was a 3-hour meeting. So we got to 2 hours. I said, okay, everybody take a break now and do 25 push-ups. And they looked at me and they said, I can't do 25 push-ups. I said, why not? I said, I'm 72 years old. I can do 25 push-ups. But you know what? 5 years ago, I couldn't.
Yeah. And I was just, we know that, like, I just interviewed Andy Galpin, and he talked a lot about, it's like, we keep talking ourselves about being a fat society. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon talks about this as well. And it's like, that we're obese or we're overweight or whatever, but what we really are is muscle deficient. And as I'm sure, and some of the audience, we've talked about sometimes just this sort of sarcopenia, or the degradation of our musculature, the ability to not maintain and keep it and all of that as we age. And that's a combination of a couple things going on there, right? Many people are like, it's all downhill from here. I'm aging. This happens. Some of it's like, if you look at the research, there's a strong case to be made that we're not nourishing ourselves enough and we're getting more sedentary. So there's that. And it is happening in the body. The ability for the body to sort of make and keep muscle is weakened as we age, especially if we're not doing anything about it. So I think as a society that is muscle deficient, which is the real issue, right? That this is something that is like an additional helper to that, right? The tool that helps so many things. And this is, I also want to, maybe you have something to speak specifically about this too, but people will come to me a lot and say, hey, Kristen, this red light therapy panel, like all the things it says on the website, that it helps. And like you just said 15 things in this podcast episode about the specifics of red light. And, the Soltec thing sounds awesome, but how can it do all this? And it's like when we get more energy, when we get more sleep, when we lower our stress load, all these beautiful things in the body can actually happen at a more optimal level. And perhaps even we don't know because we weren't living past the age of 40, all those, hundreds of thousands of years ago. But we can see that there is like an adaptation that's happening to this, that the body is like, hey, I can function better. And that means the cascade, the downstream effects of positive things happening for our health are I would say innumerable in some cases, not even like testable or knowable, because there's just so much at a cellular level what we're fixing. And for you and with Soltec, it's like at a brainwave state, so that sleep is, deeper and stress is lower. It just feels like, I don't want to say it feels like the magic pill, but it feels like a really important piece to incorporate in people's lives.
Well, it is. And it gets back to that delta sleep, because that's the restorative part. And delta sleep, everybody knows, this has been well documented, that you might be able to hear my dog in the background.
I can. I love it.
But everybody knows that with delta sleep, there is a healing effect in terms of cell growth, cell repair, and believe it or not, even DNA repair.
Wow.
So when you talk about, okay, is there a link between getting more delta sleep and having less of a chance of developing cancer? The answer is yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Preventatively. Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah. So important to share these pieces. Can you talk a little bit to me about the sort of, I want to just, as we start to wind down, I always have a couple questions to ask, but also I want to get your opinion on sort of the future of sleep science, right? You guys are sort of leading the charge with the Soltec device. There's beautiful, we'll put in the show notes and I'll be talking about it. Obviously it's on my shop already, wellpower.life/shop. The Soltec is there. There's a discount code for people who are listening to be able to experience and explore it, getting on the website and checking out Soltec, SOLTEC. And you guys leading the charge for sort of the future of sleep science. Like, what exciting things do you think are expanding or coming? And how do you how are you going to continue to kind of iterate in this space? Are you testing? Are you innovating? Like, what are you doing at Soltec, and what do you see down the road, the near future for us with sleep science?
Well, I think it's finding other ways to further increase delta sleep to get it back down to optimum levels.
Yeah.
Like in our system, we have an interesting way of doing the scoring. Most people will look at it and say, whoa, geez, I got a 70 out of 100. And I'll say, well, wait a minute. Those scores are in relationship to what we call ideal normal sleep. Because we want to give you a goal to get to, so that when you get a 90, you go, wow.
An ideal normal sleep, is there a specific, is it like a 25
like a 20-year-old?
Yeah. Okay, great. Good luck to us. We better get on that Soltec tomorrow.
Right. And so some of it is metrics and learning, related to that. Another metric that's really important is when you think about restoring delta sleep, if you've lost delta sleep, what has it turned into? It's turned into light sleep, right? And so you look at that and you go, well, wait a minute, half my sleep is light sleep. And so light sleep is everything from delta sleep all the way up to drowsiness. And so then you say, well, if that's the case, my light sleep may be getting deeper before it turns into delta. All right. So our depth scale takes that into account. And that's important, because that becomes an early indicator that, okay, I'm starting to get better, even though it doesn't show that my delta is getting better. My whole, non-REM, so light sleep and deep sleep, that quality is improving. And that also causes it to oscillate. So let's say, you're used to getting an hour, 20 minutes now, because you've restored, most of your delta sleep. Well, then all of a sudden you get 50 minutes. Well, and it's likely that, you lost that 30 minutes because it didn't meet the threshold. Because in sleep medicine, they've defined delta sleep as having 6 seconds of delta waves, out of a 30-second time period. So if all of a sudden you only had 5 seconds, it's no longer delta sleep, but it's so close.
Right. It's like directionally improve.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
By looking at it that way. And so a lot of it is staging related and understanding the scores. In terms of other advances, they relate to stimulating other parts of the brain. Okay, so for instance, let's say you have Parkinson's disease, right? And that affects other areas. They operate under different frequencies. We can still stimulate those other areas. And so wouldn't it be nice if while you're asleep, you took some of that time and you stimulated those areas to give you the treatment for these other brain conditions?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, that would be ideal under those circumstances.
Yeah.
Because you'd have less interference from the other activities like thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It'd be like more pure therapy. Same thing for things like Alzheimer's disease and other dementing illnesses. Or what about MS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or any kind of other neurologic issue? What about restoration of brain cells after a stroke? So even though these things aren't sleep related, what if they could be treated during that sleep period?
So beautiful. It's so nice to sit and talk about this and break it all down, really, because also, especially there's nuance in these new devices as they arrive, and Soltec is so innovative. And, you guys have enough science and proof and research and everything that people are getting, just changing their lives with the use of this. And I think it's important to break it down and share this time together to be able to really get the audience to understand, right? Because there's a lot of other things out on the market that's like, where am I going to budget my dollars that are going to be most effective? This is what any mattress company will tell you. It's like you're spending a certain critical number of hours in your bed, and you're spending $100,000 on a car, but maybe you should spend a little bit more on your bed because it's like actually going to be the thing that, usually from 50 grand above in a car, you're getting bells and whistles, right? This, you're getting real sleep. So how do you set up your sleep sanctuary, right? I talk about this a lot in general in the podcast with the lack of light, putting like you blackout shades, putting, other things in your bedroom that are going to support your sleep sanctuary. And this is one that seems so beautifully set up and designed for passive creation of different brainwave states and better sleep overall. So I'm so thankful that you're here chatting about all of it and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with Soltec. I can tell that you have a 30-year-old brain, the way that you fire off the questions. And remember, I'm asking multiple questions and you're remembering them all. And I always close with this question, which is, Dr. Daniel, if you could go back to yourself at like 15 years old and say, hey, Dan, I want to give you a piece of advice that's going to have you step forward into better wellness, better health, with a better version of me from this point forward, what would be that one piece of advice that you would give younger Daniel?
It would be, keep your mouth shut more often and listen.
I love that. No one's ever said that before, but I like an active listener, and you're quite the active listener today. So I really appreciate the sweetness with which you came and shared your story, all the work that you've done, just really this creating pivotal change in the field around nervous system tone, around sleep. And I can't even imagine how much study and research and diving in, which I can tell you're so passionate about. But I can't even imagine the hours and hours of labor of this love that you've put in. So thank you. There's so much gratitude from people like me who get to use a device like Soltec to improve their lives. And I didn't have to do all that work. You did it for me. So big love for that.
Again, it was, you're welcome. But again, a lot of this was just, this is something that I wanted to do, and it was really enjoyable to do it. So I had a lot of fun doing it.
Good. Well, I had a lot of fun today with you, and we'll link all the things we mentioned in show notes. Thank you so much for showing up here at the Well Power Podcast, and more to come for us. More to come as you see all my results growing and growing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again for having me.